Hello, Dr. Cass. Thank you for helping my project. Could you say a little bit about yourself?
Hi, Nate. Well, thanks for having me. Sure, I am a geologist, a planetary scientist. I study impact craters, and I'm the science advisor at the Canada Aviation and Space Museum, which is in Ottawa, Canada. Um, yeah, and I'm super excited about the moon.
So when did you find out that we were actually planning to send astronauts back to the moon?
I There was discussion behind the scenes for a long time. We knew it was sort of probably coming, and then of course I watched the announcement live, the CSA announcement, of course, announcing what Canada's contributions would be and Canada's part in the return to the moon. So I was there with everybody else, excited on my couch at the edge of my seat.
Yeah, it is pretty exciting. I mean, Artemis 2 is going to have the first Canadian astronaut to actually go around the moon. And
Mhm.
the joke I've heard is that Canada had to pay an arm for it, as opposed to an arm and a leg.
That is well, that's pretty accurate. I've not heard it put that way. That's hilarious. I'm gonna have to use that. But yeah, yep, we had to contribute yet another Canada arm, Canada Arm 3 for the Lunar Gateway.
You know, it's amazing. Canada's provided the Canada arm for the space shuttle, for the ISS, now for Gateway. Uh, it's really surprising to me that Canada has really kind of gotten entrenched in that space manipulator thing. I mean, just seems
Yeah, well, I mean,
amazing.
early on, we had we were ahead of the game in the terms of robotics. Definitely was, what Canada had become known for, and it has been our specialty for a long time. But there are a lot of areas in space exploration where we're advancing now, and everyone else is it's starting to catch up. For sure, in the robotics area, everyone, there's a lot of, globally, there's a lot of great um, advances in robotics. And so but Canada definitely has that heritage software, that heritage in space, and showing that yes, we can get it done. And so we're really happy to be able to sign on again.
And I guess how well known do you think it is in Canada that a Canadian astronaut is scheduled in as early as 2024 to go around the moon?
Well, that's a really great question. In general, I don't know how many people really know. I know that definitely all the space enthusiasts know, all of the folks in the STEM field know. But it's something that here at the museum, we're actually really making an effort in doing outreach and trying to share this wonderful news. Is exciting that Canada is going to be playing such an amazing part. And our astronaut is going to go beyond Earth orbit for the first time. So really exciting. And I think as that Artemis 2 launch date comes closer and closer, I think it'll become more widely known because it will be all over the news.
Um, I mean, my experience just asking people here in Houston, even in the Johnson Space Center area, which you would expect to be really tied in with space events,
Mhm.
that unless you're actually part of the space community, you probably don't know we're going back to the moon.
Really? In the States? I would have thought that that would be huge news all over the place. Like, I don't know, on CNN, on the major networks, they'd be chatting about it.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with how people get their news these days. You know, if you're into space, you know everything about space, but nothing else.
And admittedly, I mean, I do check our news, our major news stations, but a lot of people get their news from social media, and you only get what you follow or get what they what the trackers or Facebook thinks that you are interested in, right? So it's skewed what you learn about to
It
what your
is.
interests are.
It is. And I think it's actually points to a scarier problem for society. Us all having kind of like different views of reality and not even being able to have a conversation because we have nothing to build it on.
Yeah, that's so true. Oh, I try not to to dwell on that too much. I just hope that everybody stays open-minded and open to other, other fields, other interests, stays connected. The social media is supposed to connect the world, the internet's supposed to connect the world, but in some ways it definitely has isolated some groups.
Yeah, definitely. Well, if it was safe and affordable, would you take a trip to space?
To orbit? Yes, I would.
How about to the
Sign me up.
moon?
To the moon? Maybe. Do I want to go? Yes. I don't think I want to go on the first launch. I just want to make sure that we've reestablished everything. But yeah, I think I would go to the moon. Mars is another story. I'd probably say no to Mars, but Earth orbit, definitely yes, I'd go right now. In the moon, I'd go maybe in 10 years from now, and Mars, well, I'll be watching from home.
Well, let's just hypothetically say that you change your mind, or one of your descendants decide to go to Mars, and 200 years from now, your great granddaughter has grown up on Mars her entire life and is doing a project about the 2020s.
Oh my God.
Just like we might do a project about the 1820s or something.
Okay.
What are some things that you think would be good for her to put in her report?
Oh, wow. Oh, that's a tough question. I think one of the interesting things will definitely be how this has all come about through a pandemic. I think that's going to be huge, looking back into history, how advances and progress was still made under the conditions that that we were living, are living, but things are getting better, and things are very different in different places. So I think, yeah, the link to the pandemic would be an interesting way to go. And then, yeah, just how the world came together and the different contributions, and how there was major collaborations. Globally, things are a little shaky in some places. And so looking back, I'd hope that we'd focus on the positive. I don't know, just all the excitement and how it came about. I'm sure, it's not knowing how it progresses, afterwards between those 2 or 3 generations, would make it difficult to decide on what they would actually find most interesting looking back.
Yeah, everything seems so pressing today, but I'm sure there's lots and lots of stuff like in 1820s that were like the headliners that we have no clue about or don't even consider.
Yeah. Would you go to the moon? Can I ask you a question? Would you go?
I don't know. I kind of waffle on that. Before I started this project, I said, yeah, sure. But, as I started giving it more thought and hearing other people's reservations, I'm afraid to do skydiving so, you don't really have to skydive to go to the moon. I don't like roller coasters. One challenge of actually going to the moon is even whenever you're there, you're completely isolated from the environment. Like you're only there visually and the lower sense of gravity. It's not like, going to France and getting to walk up and down the streets.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's my reservation, is just because we're going about it a very different way than we did before. There's new technologies, new spacecraft being used, an entirely different orbit. So I'd be like, just want to make sure that that's all good first before I sign up. That's my way of looking at it.
You're thinking more of Artemis 5 or 6 as opposed to 3.
Exactly. Yeah, no problem.
So about having your great-great-granddaughter grow up on Mars, is that something you see as being a realistic possibility in the future, or do you see us as being like mainly Earth-centric?
I think we'll probably stay Earth-centric for a while longer than some people will hope. I have no doubt that humans will get to Mars and will explore Mars. What is uncertain in my mind is if we will establish a permanent colony that will be sustainable, that will last on Mars. That's really the question mark. I have no doubt that we will get there. you know, in the near future.
And you got to imagine how much that society would have to recycle and, you know, be able to be self-sufficient.
Mm-hmm.
I was driving around Houston the other day, and I on this route I took, there were like 3 landfills. I was just thinking, wow, you know, we could really use a lot of that recycling technology down here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's so much in terms of spacecraft, and you know, just to get the rocket there, kind of thing. I think that's not the issue. There are so many other sort of the smaller things like waste management, you know, a lot of the medical issues involved in astronauts going to Mars that we still have to tackle first to make that happen. You know, and things like just food, like growing food on Mars, yeah, and radiation issues. There's so many of the small things that don't come into the big picture all the time, that they really do have to check off all of those boxes before we can make it happen. I have no doubt that eventually we'll succeed, but yeah, maybe just take a little longer than hoped. I mean, look at the moon. You know, waste management on the moon. I mean, there's still bags of poop on the moon, stuff. You know, we just kind of left everything there when we left last time, because we were making space to bring moon rocks back. And I'm sure that if, you know, when we do establish you know, a permanent base on the moon, which we will do, I'm confident we will do, at least as a research station, that we will develop, we'll change the way that we did things before, right? Because it was just sort of a one-off, you know, grab and go kind of thing before. So I have no doubt we'll change that. But yeah, when you're first starting to establish things, you're just doing the touchdown, you're not worried about all the little things that, you know, come into play when you have to stay somewhere long term. Yeah, it changes the game.
It makes you wonder, you know, after 50 years, what those samples might contain. You know, going and getting those samples that have been like on the moon, going through the cold, hot cycle, you know, every month, and being irradiated by the sun, and I don't know, that those actually might turn out to be treasure troves of information that we didn't expect.
I suspect they will. It'll be interesting to see, and they do plan to, you know, collect them and take them back and analyze them. So, among other things.
You know, talking about treasure troves on the moon, what are some things that you're hoping that we discover on the moon that you would like to see investigated?
Of course, my interests are, you know, rock centered, and I can tell you that the cratering community, a lot of the things that we're focused on learning are, you know, for example, the South Pole Aitken Basin, which is the largest impact basin in our solar system and the largest on the moon, near the South Pole, which is where we're aiming to go. That basin, a lot of the ages of the craters and the ages of the surfaces across the solar system, they are based on, you know, some assumptions. They're based on first, you know, ages that we actually have from returned Apollo samples, but then they're based, you know, we've expanded and made some calculations and some assumptions to date a lot of the surfaces in the solar system. And so if we had the actual age of that impact, which we think is probably the oldest on the moon, then it'll, you know, adjust, it'll calibrate all of the other assumptions and all of the other surfaces across the solar system. And the craters, you know, the ages of the craters, that we call them relative ages, because we're making some assumptions, right? Because we don't have the samples in hand. And of course, when we do return more samples from Artemis, that'll help. That'll definitely add to the, you know, to the database and explain a lot of things. But getting samples that we can date, so that we can date that oldest crater, that'll be huge. And then there's a lot of different questions from, you know, on the moon, geology wise, that we don't have answered. We have, you know, these, you know, a handful of landing sites, samples from a handful of spots. We have a couple hundred meteorites, but we don't know exactly where they came from on the moon. So we have a very small sample size of the moon. And so the more samples we get back, you know, we're going to learn so much more everything, the history of the moon, the history of, the impact cratering history, but also like the volcanic history of the moon. There's just so much that we could learn. It's a big rock in space, and we only have like a couple of little spots where we have samples from. So.
I do get that occasionally. We've already been to the moon. Why would we go back? Type of thing. But I feel like you could probably explain a little bit about how much we don't know. I like to tell people, well, you've been to Disney World one time, you still want to go back. So.
Absolutely. And I can say, we've never landed on people have never landed on the far side of the moon. And it's, the far side is quite different from the near side as well. And so there's so much unexplored territory. And if you think about landing somewhere on the Earth, and say somebody, landed 6 spots on the Earth, would they have a full picture of the planet having just landed in 6 spots? No, not even close. There's just, Earth is definitely more dynamic and has a lot more variety of rocks and whole biomes and things like that. But it's the same for the moon. It's just a huge place, and we only have little bits and pieces of information to put the puzzle together.
Yeah, and if you randomly chose those 6 spots on Earth, your conclusion would probably be it's all wet. It's nothing but water.
Exactly. Yep,
well, thank you so much for your time. I know we covered a lot of topics. Was there anything that you want to discuss that we didn't get to?
No, I think we covered the high points. I'm just super excited to go back to the moon. I'm super excited that Canada gets to be a part of it. And there's so many wonderful contributions, and I'm looking forward to see what happens next.
Well, thank you so much, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, Nate. Have a wonderful day.
Bye-bye.